Hello, my name is Ian Watson. I am currently a Director Emeritus of the American Membrane Technology Association, or AMTA. The interview you're about to see is the 35th in a series of what we call Chats with the Pioneers. AMTA is a technical association founded on the advocacy of membrane technology for water treatment from wastewater reclamation and reuse to seawater desalination. The heart of this technology is the membrane itself. About 3.5 years ago, the Board of Directors decided to preserve the history of membrane and membrane system development. The association should make an effort to record these chats with those responsible for launching what is now a technology in common use throughout the world. AMTA's intent is to make segments of these chats available on its website so that a new generation of engineers and scientists can understand the efforts of those pioneers that helped solve some of the water issues facing the world today. With me for this session, I have Mr. Jaren Leet, Mr. Mike Stefanic, and Mr. Dirk de Winter. And what I'd like to do is start with you, Dirk, and have you give us a recap of your education and work history.
So in '62, I came to the United States and started at Worcester Tech and then studied at MIT. And then my first job was with Ionics from 1968 to '72. There I worked on piezodialysis at a time when they thought that had promise vis-a-vis reverse osmosis or electrodialysis. It was a very interesting process, but it really didn't reach commercial status. Then in '72, I worked for Millipore for 7 years till 1979. Worked mostly on ultrafiltration with the cassette system, and then in '79 I went to San Diego. So I had an offer for Ann Arbor and San Diego, which were identical, and I chose San Diego because of the weather. And there I worked with Dr. Rosidlo, who also was very early in thin film composites, and we worked on also ultrafiltration at a very high flux ultrafiltration membranes. And also there we worked on bioreactors for production of monoclonal antibodies, which were used to, say if you attach to it an X-ray opaque pointer, then it could go to a tumor. These would be tumor-specific monoclonal antibodies that would then surround the tumor so that the surgeons would be able to cut it. And these at the time we were doing contract research for quite a few companies, so producing different monoclonal antibodies. Then for Brunswick, it actually was a distraction because they were going through a bad economy in their recreation, and so they decided to sell us all off. And well, I still get a little bit of pension from them. Then in 1991, I started working for Hydronautics and really enjoyed it there. And and there I still am working about 2 days a week. And so 3-day weekends or 5-day weekends really agree with me quite a lot, and and so here I am. And that's where we are.
Good, thank you. Mike?
I graduated in 1968 from Catholic University in Washington, D.C. Probably chose the school because at the time it was the only university that accepted me that was in an 18-year-old drinking area. But got my degree in mechanical engineering. Yeah, I mean, I went to school in '64 and got my degree in mechanical engineering in 1968, and I worked for a couple consulting engineers with HVAC, and in 1969 got hired by IBM in Kingston, New York, to join the plant engineering crew. I guess my entry into the water business came as a result of a rather interesting answer to a question, because on the first day of entering into the office, my manager asked me, he said, I know that we hired you for HVAC work and building fabs for this new thing called semiconductors, but he said, what do you know about deionized water? And my answer was, water with no ions in it? He said, the best answer I got all day. I have a project for you. And thus started the torturous path to today. Put in the high purity water system in Kingston, and in 1970 they needed someone to go to San Jose to upgrade their deionized water system there, and I did, and put in 2 systems in 2 years, and at that point thought I knew everything there was to know about water treatment and deionization until I met Jaren Leet, from whom I bought the equipment for the system expansion in San Jose. And after 3 torturous interviews, he hired me to give me a chance to go into sales for the company, selling equipment to this new burgeoning semiconductor business. The hesitation there was he didn't believe that an engineer could actually sell anything or take no for an answer. And I tried to prove him wrong. I said, so give me a chance. And he did, and it turned out to be quite a jump-off point to an interesting career, because I was the first engineer to work for Aqua Media, and it just so happens that a lot of the engineers that worked in the semiconductor business knew very little about deionized water, because I found out they were all plant engineers and they all dealt with heating, ventilation, and air conditioning and process piping, but they didn't have any experience. And back in those days, not saying that I was the greatest engineer in the world, but one of the things that I could help the plant engineer at those plants was that I could give them a set of installation drawings for free if they gave me the order for the equipment. And that was fairly enticing, because that was the last thing they wanted to have to go through, is doing the plan, the elevations, and some of the isometric piping. And that helped quite a bit. And I helped some of the other salesmen achieve that, and assisted in getting more engineers into the company to do the sales work, and thus became the legacy of Aqua Media, that we expanded as quickly as the industry did, and expanded in Silicon Valley. And then as the industry migrated away from Silicon Valley into the rest of the United States, Pacific Northwest, New Mexico, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, and into the Northeast. And Aqua Media opened offices there. But Jaren approached me one day and said, if I knew anybody that wanted to go to live in Iran. And I said, yeah, I do. And he said, who? I said, me. I said, I'll go and do some work for you. And thus began a career overseas in 1975, in which I went to Iran, but little did we know that there was going to be a downturn in the politics of the country, and very little business was let. But on the way back home, Jaren said, well, there's a company called Smil in Italy that needs a deionized water system, because they're starting to make silicon wafers. And he said, if you stop off there and find out what they're doing. Well, a year later we installed the system, and I moved to Switzerland and southern Germany, working with representative firms of ours, and then finally worked for about 5 years in London. And after that, came back to the States, where Randy Truby approached me and wanted to know if I was willing to go back to London and join Fluid Systems. And I thought that after working all these years in treating tap water to make ultra-pure water, that I knew everything about reverse osmosis and seawater desalination or membrane business. And little did I know I knew about 3% of that. And so that's, again, another growth period with Fluid Systems, that you learn quite a bit about the application of RO membrane technology. Then went on to work at Crist Water for a period of time, again back with Jaren, and now with Torre, Randy hired me again. So you can see it's a very closed family of people in the business. And I guess if you don't treat them too badly, they're fairly happy with hiring you and knowing that you can possibly do something for them, and thus I'm here.
Good. Thanks, Mike. Jaren, how about you?
Mike and Randy, it is a little bit incestuous.
Incestuous, yes, exactly.
I got out of Stanford University in 1959 with a degree in geology, which later served me extremely well. In those days, they didn't have material sciences degrees, and geology gave me a fantastic little bit of chemistry, a little bit of biology, a little bit of mechanical engineering, a little bit of physics, all of which were prerequisites then for going into geology. Spent my military time in the U-2 program. Got back and shortened the story, ended up joining a young guy who had a company called PureCell that had started working with Dr. Shockley, who invented the transistor at Bell Labs, had been with Transitron, and then had come back to Stanford. His PhD was originally from Stanford, and Stanford had built him a fab, and he was convinced that the water that was the standard at that time to make a transistor, it was a Barnstead still, was nowhere near good enough quality. Shockley got together with James Dole, who had the company that later became Duolite, and he'd founded Duolite to decolorize beet sugar so he could compete with C&H Sugar, whom he really didn't like. And today in the United States, most of our horribly sugar-intensive soft drinks it's all beet sugar that's been decolorized. But the outgrowth of Shockley knowing, or James Dole knowing Shockley, came mixed bed ion exchange, and we started. They needed a vendor. That vendor was PureCell. Started to grow. Jerry Mannerwood, another Stanford guy who unfortunately died not too long thereafter, started the company. The semiconductor industry started to grow. Bob Noyce and Gordon Moore had all spun out of Shockley to found Fairchild. Jerry started delivering pure water to Fairchild and recirculating it, and asked me to join him. I did. We sold the company shortly thereafter to Foremost Dairies, which was a terrible mistake. I got myself fired, and a couple of years later bought it back for less than inventory cost, and we were off and rolling. Broga had a great course. I think it was 67 or 68. I started Aquamedia in 67 on this new technology, reverse osmosis, and I went down to San Diego, learned a little bit about RO, came back, and in 1969 we had a terrible problem with Fairchild up in San Rafael. They'd had a drought, and the lakes were down. A lot of organics, terrible organics, and we bought a system from Roga, and that was the first commercially sold RO system to the semiconductor industry. It was the same year that TI purchased modules and membranes, or vessels and modules from Roga, and built their own with Austin McCormick, and the same year that IBM and Manassas had the same problem and got together in a joint venture with DuPont that ended up with the hollow fine fiber. All independent, had no knowledge of each other. But I got going with Aquamedia in the semiconductor industry, and as everybody knows, it grew enormously. And Aquamedia, thanks to Mike and others, Randy, we dominated that growth of that industry. The first chip that Intel ever made was made with Aquamedia water, and the Japanese came calling. We had a joint venture in Japan in 1971, Nihon Aquamedia. It's now Nomura Microscience. We put an office into Hong Kong in '75 because we did the first wafer fab in Korea, the first wafer fab in Taiwan, the first wafer fab in Singapore. Mike sold that one too. And the first RO-based ultra-pure water system in Japan, the TT Public Corp, through Nihon Aquamedia, expanded because because Motorola needed service into Arizona and the Austin area. We put an office in Dallas across from TI, an office back east. Mike's touched on what we did overseas. It was an exciting time, and boy did we learn about membrane systems, the RO membrane systems for ultra pure water. The first one there at Fairchild and San Rafael came, we bought the whole package, and it came with positive displacement pumps. And we screwed them down into the concrete and managed to shake the entire building, which shut the fab down. Had to come back and put in centrifugal pumps. But a lot of good old stories. Aquamedia came apart in '84. I ended up working over in Hong Kong with Dean at our Hong Kong operation, and then got into the semiconductor process equipment business in Hong Kong and in Singapore, along with a close relationship with Christ out of Switzerland. I founded Christ Singapore and got them going in Southeast Asia. Came back to the United States in '98, Halloween '98, and have been a consultant around, but mostly for Christ, some board positions and other things. Been a very, very exciting life.
How long was Aquamedia actually in business?
From 1967 to 1985.
So you had a pretty good run.
Yeah, we had.
And did you sort of naturally drift into the founding of Aquamedia, or did something propel you there?
No, I got, as I said, I joined PureCell,
Right.
and we sold PureCell to Foremost Semiconductor, and we were delivering, we had a water purification plant, and we were delivering that water in tankers to Silicon Valley, and then polishing it on site. And we were doubling every month in revenue, and I needed more trucks. And Foremost didn't, they had a 5-year plan on capital things like trucks, so you couldn't. So I rented milk trucks, and we could sterilize the milk truck, and we'd deliver on the milk truck, and I'd rent them because I couldn't sign a lease. And I was just figuring out how to keep this company growing, and they didn't like that. And so I got myself fired, which was fine, and I started my own company. And I had an idea for a mobile demineralizer, mounting a cation-anion exchanger on a, the frame was a horse, the frame that they would use to make a horse trailer. Because horse trailers, have to be real strong because the horses move around, and that was the concept. And we would take that, we'd regenerate it at our regeneration plant, and then tow it down to our customers and hook it up, and then we could do the bulk demineralization, and we had some processing, mostly carbon and filters, and and we'd polish it, and that was what got us going originally. But once we discovered RO, that was changed the game changer.
So was Aquamedia at that time the only company that was providing this service in Silicon Valley, or did you have some competition?
We had competition from Polymetrics, Dave Grunow, but we were much more focused on the semiconductor industry, and he was distracted. Polymetrics was always distracted with big desal orders or one thing or another. So we had major market share worldwide.
When we interviewed Dave Grunow, he was telling us about the early days of Polymetrics and how it actually started in the ultra-pure water business. And I think he was buying membranes from Rover at the time.
Yep.
Correct.
And it never was quite clear to me exactly why he kind of went off at a tangent and went after the big plants, because it seemed to me that he was doing quite well.
We, as I said, our first reverse osmosis system we purchased from Roga. And that wasn't necessarily the membranes were fine, but it wasn't as satisfactory as it could be. And we purchased a number of RO machines, systems, just the RO from Polymetrics. And I knew Dave. David went to Stanford, and we knew each other, and we did quite a bit of business with him. But everybody seems to get greedy, and instead of Roga being the worst one, we'd get a big opportunity, and then they'd say, well, gee, we shouldn't let them execute that. We can do it better. And so, and that was the same way with Polymetrics. So we ended up eventually making our own systems.
Right.
And we had learned enormous amount from mistakes that Roga made with the systems and Polymetrics made with the systems and looking around. And so we made pretty damn good systems. I mean, there's some that I visited one at SEH 4 or 5 months ago, and we sold that in 75, 76, and it's still running, still doing well. Yeah, of course, the modules have been changed, but
yeah.
high quality. And
Well, Dave Grunow sold his, I think it's either his first or his second RO unit to IBM in San Jose. And after that, it was Aquamedia that represented Polymetrics for 3 or 4 years.
Oh, is that right?
yeah.
Yeah, and then my theory is now that I know a little bit about the RO business as it was everyone who made these smaller units got the opportunity at one time or another to make a larger unit and not sell to the semiconductor companies, because it was still a hard sell to move them away from clarification and deionization and to replace it with a reverse osmosis unit. And it took a while to do that. And so the attraction of going to a larger system for a municipal or a larger industrial application lured the people away. It was it just was inevitable that they would do that.
Yes, I think Polymetrics sold the first big municipal system in Florida in like 1974 or something like that.
And then Hydronautics also did the systems as well.
Yeah.
And
But Hydronautics was not around in those days.
no, the late 70s though.
Late 70s.
Right,
Yeah.
with Jim Bartlett.
Yeah. So, Dirk, you worked on a number of non-water membrane applications,
Yep.
and some of them very interesting. And did you just sort of drift naturally into, I mean, you're a membrane guy, obviously.
Yeah.
So did you just drift naturally into the membrane field for desalination, or
Well, initially,
Did you
yes.
get pushed in there, or?
Well, I've just been lucky to have very interesting problems thrown at me, and the piezoelectrolysis membrane was one of those. It's a composite, so two mosaic, how do you call it, labyrinths that go through each other of anionic and cationic membranes, or exchange membranes. Then they have to meet at both places so that you could make a continuous a loop, electrical loop.
Right.
And downstream also, we started out with, because you have to be very gentle with the pressure, you apply a lot of pressure on top. We had 2,000 psi at the bottom. You have to support it in a gentle way. And initially they supported it with a porous plastic material that then collapsed. And then because it still had a little porosity to let things through, it wouldn't really allow for a continuous electrical. So the sodium and the chloride ions wouldn't meet each other at the bottom. There's a lot of resistance. So then we changed to a fiberglass cloth, which of course doesn't compact, so all the openings stay open, and that was the first indication that the process could work. And then we went to the latex polyelectrolyte membrane, which, as you coalesce a latex of styrene butadiene, these are 0.4 micron particles. They all coalesce, but they entrap between them a polyelectrolyte, which is 7 million molecular weight. So that can go over about maybe 10 of these particles, and it gets completely captured like a snake cage. And so, being a sodium polystyrene sulfonate, that's your carrier of the sodium ions. Then you convert the latex to a cation exchange membrane, and so that was a very interesting process.
For somebody who'd worked in what I, as a layman, would call the exotic membrane field,
Mm-hmm.
would find working in RO membrane field kind of boring.
Oh, not really. You still have concentration polarization aspects, mass transfer, and so many interesting aspects to it. Oh, the chemistry that you have to know for fouling, anti-fouling things. So the membrane field has always been so interesting. That's why all of us are still working as consultants, because we
That's
never
right.
get bored.
Yeah.
You never get bored of it. Mm-hmm.
I noticed from your resume that you did some work on a gas separation membrane.
Uh-huh. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And that's not water related, but it's a membrane nevertheless. What are the differences between an RO membrane and a gas separation membrane?
Well, gas separation membrane, you start out with a hydrophobic polysulfone, very asymmetric membrane, and then you do some tricks to it. And in this case, we got a membrane that has such a high flux that you actually are able to observe osmotic pressure with air. So nitrogen on one side doesn't have very much passage through it. And since you have a higher concentration here, you see a backflow with the air on the other side, a lot of nitrogen on this side, you see a backflow getting pressure there. It's just such a high flux membrane. So we might use that for something.
So Mike, you went off to Iran. How long were you there?
I was there for 16 months. It was an interesting tour of duty. Aquamedia had sold a high purity water system to Bell Helicopter in Isfahan, and of course, when you go into countries and you sell something against either local people or people who have been established for a while, whether it was a UK company, et cetera, but you ride the coattails of a US company over there. Jaren can finish the rest of the story, but it was one of those profitable jobs, because at the time that the Shah decided to curtail any type of industrial development, the system was sold, shipped, and paid for, but sat on the docks in Houston and never got shipped over, and thus began the end of the cooperation with our representative company over there. But one of the things it's taught me, for the first time I was outside of the country, it taught me quite a bit of the intrigue of being the expatriate overseas, to be sent into a country where you don't realize you're arriving at 2 o'clock in the morning, all of the signs are in an alphabet that you don't recognize. Everybody's family, and all of the international flights are coming in simultaneously, and all of the families are waiting 6 and 7 and 8 people deep outside this chain link fence outside of the arrivals hall, and you're thinking, this is an interesting circumstance. Nobody's here waiting for me, and I have to get from my place to the hotel called the Sheraton. And I quickly learned that you have to adapt to the pronunciation of words, English words, in the local tongue, knowing that eventually, after about 10 or 15 minutes of waving my arm and so forth, I had to get to the Aria Shoraiton. And then to have 5 other people stuffed in this little Hillman cab, and everybody's bags were on the roof, and we were going to various hotels. I'm thinking to myself, if I ever get there, it will be the greatest victory of my life, and I did. The rest of it was all easy. But you're working with expatriates. You got to learn how to live overseas, and you ran into hash house harriers, and many of the old timers there still have the Aquamedia hash house harriers sweatshirts for running in winter. And then it progressed to where I went to Italy and Germany and Switzerland and the UK, where you learn that you don't have to really be the sole supplier of all the equipment. You get to learn and create joint ventures with other companies in those countries, like with Advanced Water Systems in England, with Castagnetti in Italy, with E.L. Bateman in South Africa, and they made life a bit easier because they were your representatives. You sold what was proprietary-ish equipment from the United States, or they had never built it before, like the RO units and the UV lights and so forth. And the rest of the equipment could be built, like the control panels and the sand filters and the ion exchange columns in those countries. But you sort of learned to teach them that they had to have certain coatings on the pipe, Teflon-coated pipes, a certain grade of rubber on the interior of the ion exchange columns. But the relationships worked well, and as the industry migrated to those areas, it was a fantastic experience, as you well know, traveling around the world and getting paid for it, and at least sending some profitability back home.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. and during those days, it worked.
So you, Aquamedia, I mean, I've always been in the municipal field, but even I'd heard of Aquamedia. How did you manage to stay ahead of the competition?
We were tremendously customer driven, and the semiconductor customers were really advanced, and we had a chance to work with the R&D section of our customers who would say, hey, we need better water. How do we get better water? And better water was defined by having not only being 18 megohm water, but lower particle counts. And vendors would come up with better particle counters. We learned about how to control the bacteria with various wavelengths of ultraviolet. And the customers were always willing and looking forward to some way that we could improve the system, and they could prove to themselves that the better quality water, the higher their yields would be. And it was a very exciting time, and we were trying to build the best systems we could. Now, from a business model standpoint, we built systems that were too good. They lasted too long, and we didn't have a chance to replace them. But we had Aquamedia had some really smart, really good engineers, and particularly Ken Wall, who unfortunately passed, was a brilliant systems engineer and could put together the pieces. And we had guys like Mike who listened to the customer and could understand what the customer was saying, and come back and say, hey, we've got to do it this way.
So how big a
Improve.
company was Aquamedia at its peak?
At its peak, we had, well, it's a little difficult to answer. We believed in service, customer service, and local service, so that our branches, for the most part, were partnerships. We had a partnership, Aquamedia of Arizona, and we did all the system work in Sunnyvale. They did the local service, installed it, and they were their customers. Same thing in Dallas, same thing in the East Coast, same thing in the Pacific Northwest. Direct employees, we peaked at about 230 and 30 million out of Sunnyvale, but that didn't include, we had 40 or 50 employees at Aquamedia. In Japan, Neon Aquamedia, and I'd have to really think about the other ones scattered about.
Right.
But I guess the total overall revenues, and when the company came apart in 84, 85, 50, 60 million, and probably 400 employees, wouldn't you say? 400, 450 employees, something along that line.
You mentioned earlier that in the early days you sold the company to a dairy,
Yeah,
and that
well,
was I'm intrigued as to why you would
Okay.
sell a water treatment company to a dairy.
we the name of the company was PureCell, Purecell. A guy by the name of Gerald Manerud, graduated from Stanford, was a chemist and a historian. And he just graduated and was still on campus, and went down, and there was a restaurant that we used to go when we were pulling all-nighters for term papers and things, that had a great breakfast called the Reno Club in East Palo Alto. And it was also the place that opened up so the alcoholics could come in and get their first drink, and one thing or another. Anyway, Jerry went down for breakfast and ended up sitting next to a guy who was a disgruntled employee of Alhambra Water. Alhambra was owned by Foremost Dairies. And he had been a truck driver who was delivering distilled water to Travis Air Force Base for the wet jets. When the first 707s came out for the military jets, they didn't have, in dry climates, they didn't have enough thrust. So this guy was complaining to Jerry how difficult it was delivering this water from San Francisco, distilled, out to Travis Air Force Base, how little he was getting paid, and how much money that Alhambra was charging him, and told him how much per gallon, and charging the Air Force. So Jerry said, gee, I think I can do that better. And so he bought a used truck and put some regenerable cation anion on, went up to Travis Air Force Base, got a used milk tanker, and tapped into a fire hydrant, and made better quality water, because all they were interested in was cation anion removal, and made quite a bit of money that summer, and then came back and started, the semiconductor industry started demanding purified water. So he built a water purification plant and started delivering it again. And Alhambra, we cut Alhambra off totally. And so they said, well, we can't have this. So they came down and made us a cash offer. And Jared never had any cash, any money. I'd never had any money. I hashed my way through Stanford, and so did he. So this looked pretty good, and so we took the cash. Jared given me 25% of the company, and I stayed down there, and I told the story earlier, 8 months, and then started Aquamedia when I got fired.
Yeah.
But and I took the cash that they'd paid, my portion of the cash, to start the company in. So they seeded their own demise.
So
But
that's how it happened.
that's how it
Had nothing to do
happened.
with
No, it had. But we used stainless steel milk tankers, and we could clean them up and sterilize them, and they were
Right.
perfect for the delivery of high purity water.
Right.
And one of my favorite stories from the old days, which is not membrane related, but we went down to Southern California, and we saturated all possible users with little chemical flagons, Aqua Media logo on it, and bulk water, $0.105 a gallon. But our written literature said it was $0.105 a gallon plus transportation charges, plus delivery charges. And we rented or leased a brand new stainless steel trailer, painted it up like mad, and we parked it. We had no interest, absolutely no interest in getting an order. But we took the profit out of Arrowhead's bulk water delivery system, because every purchasing agent said, he'd have the flagon on and call in the Arrowhead salesman. and that was great fun those days. Great
Who was
fun.
Harry Gupta at Arrowhead at the time?
Yeah.
I bet he was thrilled.
oh, yeah. I mean, Arrowhead was, we ended up selling the service business to Arrowhead in 1976, including that.
So who influenced you most in the business, do you think, Mike? I mean, you went to work fairly early for Jaren.
Right, but that's the interesting point is from the salesperson's perspective, you're probably only as good as your support team. So the influence came from Jaren, who gave a lot of people their start in sales, and with them, he gave them the autonomy to go out and do the things themselves. He wasn't a micromanager at all, and that gave us a certain amount of freedom. Jaren also hired a lot of people who knew things that we didn't know. He hired Randy, he hired Hob McPherson. He, as I said, was in a partnership or represented Dave Grunow, and there were Roger Martin came in. I mean, here Roger Martin was selling at Culligan and won a job at Siliconics against my bid with a reverse osmosis unit. Roger was a good enough salesman. Some people used other adjectives for Roger, but he sold a carboxylic resin bed as pre-treatment so that they could get longer runs on their downstream ion exchange. But little did Siliconics know that you couldn't take organics out of the water with carboxylic resin. But by Jaren hiring Roger, he put a team together that whenever the salespeople needed help, we could go to Randy, we could go to Hob. And the service people learned so many things by hands-on. I mean, learning how to clean systems that were biofoul at the time. The first mention of biofouling came in the high quality loops in the semiconductor business, and thus created the chemical industry that at first we were only using acid and sodium hydroxide and sodium metabisulfite, but more and more exotic cleaners came on the market, the use of hydrogen peroxide. It was an unbelievable learning experience there. So the two major influences in my life in this case were Jaren and meeting Randy, because we always need help in RO, and I still remember him giving me books on the Roga book on how to design equipment and what to look for and so forth, and then lo and behold, he came to work for us too. So and then both of them hired me twice. So that can't be too bad.
Dirk, I noticed that while you were at Hydronautics, you worked on a hollow fiber membrane. I'm assuming that was a UF?
UF, yeah. UF,
what did that work consist of?
well, it's a design for a particular module, one of those, it's an 8-inch or a little bit more than 8-inch and about 5 feet tall or something. And these modules are used, well, they can be in England, southwest of London. They're used for removing bacteria and viruses from river water if you don't have to remove any salt. And nowadays, the UF hollow fibers are used quite a lot for pretreatment of RO, where you can increase the flux maybe from 8 GFD to 12 GFD and reduce the footprint of large plants. So those are being used pretty much worldwide now.
Did Hydronautics already have a module?
No.
Or you developed this from scratch?
Well, there is a patent on it. We're actually not using the features. Well, we're using some of the features of that patent, but and some of those early modules well, they're supposed to last 5 years. In England, they've been lasting about 12 years now, which is quite a long time, and so about 12 years now. We got some. In the beginning, as far as the fiber making and so forth, we had a lot of help with other consultants.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's making a membrane last longer than it should is also not a good business model.
Well, I guess you wouldn't like that too much. But, well, that's...
Yeah, that was when TFC modules first started being used in Florida. To start to replace the cellulose acetate, we expected maybe 5 or 6 year life, and some of them went 15 years. And I thought, well, the membrane manufacturers must be really upset about that, particularly as the prices were going down during this lifetime.
Right.
But it does give you a good reputation for your product, and that's important.
Well, it just goes to show you how the membrane business sort of destroyed the ion exchange service business by giving a 10 to 20 times longer run on the resin when it was when you were, instead of exchanging bottles every 3 days, now it was every 30 days or 45 days.
Right.
And then the membranes got so good that you weren't selling replacement modules, elements, as frequently as you had hoped or would wish, or your business model would demand.
When you went to, you didn't stay in Italy very long, just long enough to make a sale?
The sale, and then I got to Italy, and I told Jaren after I was there for about 3 weeks, and I left. I went to Iran weighing about 190 pounds, came back from Iran weighing 160 because I was running in half marathons and so forth, and the cuisine was great, but limited, in a sense that lamb and rice and grilled tomatoes were great, but only so much. And I came back weighing about 165. By the time I got to Italy, I couldn't believe how quickly you could get back up to 190 eating pasta every day that you've never tasted before in your whole life. But after about 3 weeks there, Jaren said, "So Mike, what's the story?" And I said, "Well, I think we have a chance of getting this job." He said, "How long do you think it'll take for you to find out?" I said, "Probably about another month." And by this time, I was negotiating enough with the engineering group of SMEAL, Montecatini, and they were absolutely impressed with the fact that we had the know-how to do this. An important factor, though, is Castagnetti, an Italian company, also had the inside track because they were doing a lot of work with the Montecatini group. So it was the fight between know-how and the inside information, the old family, the familia, and so I was asked at the final negotiations if I would be willing to accept the purchase order, but be able to work with Castagnetti to build the equipment that they could make in Italy and bring the equipment over from the United States that came from Sunnyvale. And I called up Jaren and I said, "We have an order, but it's going to be like this." I just described it to him. And then he said to me, "Well, who's going to be doing the engineering and the coordination?" I said, "I will." Well, it was a great year over there. And in the interim, you didn't have to do the engineering and so forth. I was going into, I was flying up to England because now I'm speaking somewhat of a common language. And there were companies like Inmos and Plessey and National Semiconductor and General Instruments, and Motorola was there, and Marconi. And basically, they all had to upgrade their water systems as well. And that's when we ran into Bob Siegel of Advanced Water Systems, and he would be able to build the equipment that could be made locally, and still we would import the equipment from the United States. And at that time, you have to consider that it was during when Carter was the president, and the dollar was extremely weak against all other currencies. Everybody of course, in the United States was saying, how could this happen? The dollar is so weak. And I'm living at the time, living in London, saying, what a life this is. We can ship things over from the United States, and it's half the price of what it costs there. Oh, please, don't let the dollar get strong. And we had, with that in mind, we were able to, I was able to continue staying there. And then, lo and behold, we didn't win a job at Siemens, but Siemens had a semiconductor fab going into Pretoria in South Africa. And we went down there, got that project, worked with Bateman, and then even was able to put in, I suppose, one of the first permeate staged RO at a power plant in Vierfontein in South Africa, where they wanted to get the water as pure as possible by membrane, so they didn't have to have ion exchange regeneration, because for fear of having the chemical trucks blown up on the way to the plant and stopping the high purity water for the boilers. And so there were applications that you would never believe, but that's what led to about, and then Randy hired me, so it was 20 years altogether overseas.
Well, and then at the same time, Mike, you forgot about Queen Elizabeth, and the Brits had the Falkland War, and they took it was the QE2, and bought vessels and membranes from us in some design, and assembled and built the system underway to go down and provide drinking water to support the Falkland War. I think before the QE2 left England, with all the stuff to be assembled on the way, the Argentinians blew up that one ship with that Exocet
With the Exocet
missile, and the crews, the assembly, and the engineers who were going down there, they were threatening to revolt, and so the deal was made. Ship's underway, and if you have everything operational by the time you get across the equator or something like that, we'll drop you off, and you won't have to go into the war zone. Lo and behold, it was done.
It was done.
It's called incentive. But that was a big membrane order, and I know Roga had to jump through some hoops to get those for us.
Dirk, I mean, you have an impressive list of patents that you shared with us. One of those particularly stand out as being the most interesting you worked on, or the most satisfying?
I think the piezoelectric module
Piezodialysis?
is that was a 2000 psi module, stainless steel, with a ship iron and 1.5 inch bolts. We had it running for a couple of months, and I guess got bored.
Yeah, that was, I mean, I can remember people talking about that for a long time as being, the next big step forward in membrane technology, and it never really materialized.
Yeah, I guess I did more work in hardware than even though I studied chemical engineering. Sort of reminds me of that Marisa Tomei and my cousin Vinny, where she said, "Oh, my brothers are mechanics. My father was a mechanic. My grandfather was a mechanic." In my case, I studied chemical engineering, but my two brothers are mechanical engineers. My father, mechanical engineer, and my maternal grandfather, all mechanical engineers. So it's sort of in the blood there.
Yeah. My brother was the first engineer in my family. I was the second, so.
I got one story, membrane story.
Good.
Real membrane story. We had this on again, off again relationship with Roga. And they'd do something that was really bad for us, and I'd get really mad at them. And they did something that was really, really bad, and I got really, really mad. Orange County Water District came up for bid on the modules. And I talked with Tori, and we went down. I was the American, the Yank, and went down to the district meetings and one thing or another. Tori priced them right, and we ended up getting that massive, at that time, massive order, and that brought Tori into the United States.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it was the first big order.
We had shortly, maybe about 2 years later, Torrey tested NF membranes in Fort Myers, and Mitsubishi actually bid the job, and that was, and I'd heard the name, but I really didn't know that they were active, and I was really surprised that they were as active as they were in those days, and they really didn't have any representation here, as far as I can recall. So this has always been my final question of all these interviews. Dirk, if you had to, now that you know all the things you've done on your career, if you had to go back and start again as an undergraduate, would you have done the same thing?
Oh, definitely.
You have no regrets.
And I've been very lucky with the people who have been my bosses and the problems that have been thrown to me. I definitely very happy with what happened.
Mike?
I have no regrets with it.
You were on a perpetual holiday in Europe, so you obviously don't have any regrets.
Or even in the United States. I mean, I always, to use an analogy, I always thought that it was the closest thing to being 007 that a mechanical engineer could get, and I loved every minute of it.
Jaren, what about you?
Oh, I wouldn't change a thing. I have been blessed and have had a fantastic life, been able to experience the birth and unbelievable growth of an industry that has truly changed the world, the semiconductors. Had a chance to travel and learn from Japan to all over the world, Tehran. I remember eating my first real Italian pizza on the street in Milano with Mike. Yeah, just blew my mind. And drink South African wines, and I've had a great life.
Good.
And,
Well, you don't know this, but many years ago, you unknowingly did my wife and I a big favor. I've known your son, John, for
Yes.
many years, and I told him we were going to Singapore. And so he contacted you, and you arranged for us to be on the executive floor of the Mandarin Hotel in Singapore.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you for that publicly.
That was great. The years in Singapore were fantastic, and between Singapore and Malaysia and Thailand, and we had systems up there, and then with Christ, and been to Kuching over in that's the Malaysian state in Indonesia, Kalimantan, and just fantastic.
Good.
Fantastic.
Good. Well, I want to thank you all for coming. It's been very interesting talking to you all. I've known Mike for a long time. Jaren and I have met a couple of times. Never met Dirk, but I'm very pleased to make your acquaintance. And I think you three gentlemen have created a fitting end to our interview series. Thank you very much.
Thank you.